Now, one of them that these guys had found was a lady who had been taken about 4 years ago by the ISIS fighters. Her husband was killed, her brothers were killed, her uncles were killed, and her sons were all murdered by these ISIS fighters. She had been rescued with one of her daughters. She said, I think she's still alive, and I think I know where she is. And she gave that information to our team that was there. Sure enough, Naveen was still alive. That's when we got the call. So we got on an airplane. We flew to Baghdad in Iraq. Welcome to the Liberating Humanity podcast. I'm Paul Hutchinson. Today, we're going to go to the Middle East, probably one of the most dangerous areas of any of the operations that we did. It was so dangerous that me and my team weren't really qualified to go, but we paid for some guys and we ended up going for the reuniting of some of the children with their families, which was amazing. So everything started out many years ago. A friend of mine by the name of Walt, who had been invited by his church to do what they called a non-sanctioned mission to Iraq in the Middle East. He spoke some of the languages there and had some familiarity with the people and was just there trying to find out what was going on and to create some relationships in the area. He came back with some horrific stories of what was going on. In Iraq itself, the ISIS terrorists were not only terrorizing a lot of the Christian families that were there and displacing them and blowing up their cities and their houses, etc. They were going after anybody who did not share their beliefs in their religion. And this is sad. We see this today. The conflicts that we see in Gaza and in Israel, massive loss of lives. Why? Because of religious ideologies, because people believe that somehow their religion is the truth from God and it allows them to justify genocide. And this has happened for many years. Even with Christians, I'm a Christian and a lot of us are like, oh, I'd never do that stuff that ISIS did. Really? Look at what happened with the conquistadores, right? We literally came here to South America and destroyed entire cultures trying to push our own agenda. And so, yes, we're all guilty in some way, but it is horrific what was happening there in Iraq. Not only were they murdering women and children and men, anybody who was Christians, anybody who shared religious beliefs that were different than theirs was on the chopping block. So Walt came back with these stories of how the ISIS terrorist leaders were authorizing their people to go in and kill every single man that was associated with certain religions, and then they would take the women and children and use them as sex slaves with their goal to breed out the civilizations. One of those civilizations, or one of those groups, was called the Yazidis. In fact, my attorney, Scott at the time, brought me this Newsweek article that was shown to him by Walt. And in this Newsweek article, it said, will no one save the Yazidis from extinction, right? Extinction. Why? Because this was the only place on earth that this religious group was, and they were being destroyed by the ISIS terrorist fighters. They had already killed almost all of the men that were part of this religious group, and they had taken them hostage. This is the worst form of human trafficking, where they destroy the families. They kill the fathers, they kill the sons, they kill the brothers, they kill the uncles. They take the women and children and use them as sex slaves, with their goal is to breed out that civilization. So I was shown this Newsweek article, and I thought, this is horrible. This is horrible what's going on. So I had done these all over the world. But the Middle East, that was an entirely different animal. Very, very dangerous. So I'm thinking, well, I mean, our team doesn't have the ability to do something. Let's talk to the foundation that I was working with at the time. The former Homeland Security agent was running it. And I said, look, this is what my attorney had brought me. What do you think? He goes, yeah. This Walt guy talked to us about it as well. He said, our foundation doesn't have the manpower to go in there either. However, he said, Glen Becks has a team that can. He has a group, an organization called the Nazarin Fund. And with that, he has a team of very specialized fighters that are in the Middle East. And what they were doing over the last number of years is they were helping displaced Christian families find new homes. And they were going in, and this was dangerous. This was, gunfire everywhere. This wasn't the typical operation where you're going in and, conning the traffickers into showing you where they're keeping the kids. This is in your face, guns and ammo and shooting and death. And you don't have the support of the government there in getting these people out. It's so much of a challenge that there weren't any other countries that were helping. Not the US, not Europe, nobody was helping these Yazidi people in their plight. Just like nobody was helping the Christians in that area other than the Nazarin Fund and a few other foundations like them. And so we sat down and we looked through this team, and this team was amazing. In fact, I'll go through the details of a lot of them in a minute. But one of them, Rudy, who was running the team, he was over anti-terrorism for most of Africa for the State Department at one point. This guy knows his stuff. He's got a heart of gold, and he was leading this amazing team. One of them had gotten shot like 17 times. And was still alive, right? Of all of the battles that he had been in, a couple of them were fighting as young as 7 years old. And they were fighting in Lebanon and in Iraq and some of these areas. They were involved in some of those wars from a very, very young age. So these were hardened operators. These were guys who could handle the kind of crap that was going on there. And so we had this meeting. We got together and said, okay, what do we need to do? These guys right now are completely focused on helping the displaced Christians in the area, but we would love to take a portion of their team and have them focus on the Yazidis and helping these kids get out. And so we had this sit-down meeting, and I said, listen, I will contribute the first $50,000 towards this operation, towards changing what their focus is. And so I wrote this check of $50,000, wrote it to the Nazarin Foundation, because that's the team that was already on the ground. This is the team that was already there. So I wrote the first $50,000, and because Glen Becks has this massive audience of amazing people that are behind a lot of these causes that he is supporting, he said, listen, I'm going to tell my audience that we've got a wealthy donor that already put some money in towards this new initiative, helping the Yazidis in this area. And so he went out to his audience and raised massive multiples of what I had just put in, but I put that first $50,000 in. So now we had the team, and they were starting to refocus their attention. They were helping a few of the refugees get out, and they were relocating them to other places, relocating them into Jordan, taking some of them into Lebanon and some other neighboring areas at the time. Fast forward a few months, these guys had been on the ground and actively helping not only to relocate these displaced Christians, but now they were helping the Yazidis. They were helping these women and children get out of the danger of being taken by these ISIS fighters and being used as sex slaves. And so I said, I'd love to come and just kind of see what the money is being used for. And so I jumped on a plane and I flew to Germany, where I was met by Rudy. Now, they didn't want me to fly directly into Iraq or into Lebanon or to Jordan myself at the time because there was a lot of civil unrest that was going on. So Rudy, the guy who was over the entire team that was there, meets me in Germany, and we fly together on the plane and we get into Lebanon. Once we get there, he had a team that actually met us, not after we got through security, not even, not out at the road, not as we got through security. He had a team that met us as we came off the plane In fact, they came onto the plane and were able to meet us there and take us off. So high level clearance and high level security from his team. So then I didn't have to walk in the line or anything else. It was awesome. We went through this little special area where they just stamped my passport. I didn't have to walk in any lines or anything because the entire airport was being controlled at the time by Hezbollah. We go out to the car, and this car, first of all, it is fully ballistic. I mean, these doors, we're not talking about little stuff that's going to handle some handgun rounds. We're talking level 4, level 5 type stuff. We're talking windows that are that thick that won't even roll down. We're talking doors that are 250, 300-pound type things. That's the vehicles that these guys were in. And I get into the back. He opens, one of my security guys opens up the back door. I get in, and on the floor, there was a bunch of thing that I noticed as I was getting in. My foot tripped against something, and as I sat on the seat, I looked down, and the entire floor was full of weapons. AR-15s, handguns, all of these weapons. In fact, the driver turned around and he said, "Your tools are on the floor, sir." And I'm like, cool. That's awesome. I like those kind of tools. So then he took off, and we had a couple people that flew in at the same time. There was 3 separate cars. And I loved how this worked. These guys, just so that you didn't have to worry about, being in a place at a stoplight or even on the freeway where somebody could get around, these cars, all 3 of the drivers had earpieces and were communicating with each other and were working in unison, where one would come up in front of some traffic and it would slow down the traffic, and the other one would come in front of them and go up, and then the third one would go in front of that one and then slow down that traffic, etc. So 3 cars working together with guys who knew how to drive and knew how to handle being in an area like that where you could have terrorists anywhere and you didn't want to be stopped anywhere, where you couldn't get out or couldn't move right or left, etc., was pretty awesome. So we went in, we met with a number of the families that had been rescued, that they were bringing them into Lebanon. They had some safe houses that were there. There were women and children who had all lost their fathers, had lost their brothers, had lost their husbands in this horrific war that was going on there. And so we sat down with a few of these families. They showed us some pictures of their loved ones that were lost. We saw some of the places that were being built out, these safe houses, et cetera. And we realized that there was a need for better safe houses. There was better healing retreats, better places where these families could go and have a permanent residence where they could be free of all of the crap that was going on. And unfortunately, Lebanon is a beautiful place, but it still has some of the same dangers that they had experienced when they were in Syria, when they were in Iraq, etc. But they were doing their best to provide some good housing for these families. Then it was kind of fun. They went, I don't know if you guys realize this, but there's a place that's talked about in the Bible called the Cedars of Lebanon. And that's in Lebanon. It's right on the border of Lebanon and Syria. And so we took this drive up in the mountains, and we went to the Cedars of Lebanon. And there's some old cedar trees. In fact, there's a cedar tree there that they say is almost 7,000 years old. This is kind of cool because that means that tree was there 2,000 years ago when Jesus walked through that area, and when it was there even before that. And a lot of these biblical references to this area, some of these trees were there that long ago. I ended up getting a couple cones, pine cones, from these cedar trees. And so I got a couple cones and was able to bring them home because I thought that's kind of cool, having an actual cone from a tree that's over 7,000 years old that has seen all kinds of crazy history in that area. So we had some beautiful dinners. I got to meet the team. I got to meet all of the guys who had been serving for many, many years in helping the families in this area, and now we're focused on helping the Yazidis. One of my favorite people that we met as part of the team was a guy by the name of Jawad. Big guy. I mean, this guy, he's triple wide of what I am. A lot of these guys were born there in the Middle East, and they had fought many, many wars, but many of them have been working for the U.S. and our other allies in helping a lot of the challenges that are happening in that area. And these guys are fearless team. I met with a guy by the name of Dave Lopez, who is now one of my best friends on the planet. What an amazing, amazing man. Dave was there in the rescue mission that we did in Colombia that was highlighted in the movie Sound of Freedom. Dave was there on that mission, but we had done 3 separate cities out in the same day. I was there in Cartagena. There was a team in Medellin, Colombia, and then there was a team in Armenia, Colombia. And between all of them, over 120 victims were rescued that day. Dave was there on that operation, but he was in one of those other cities. So I hadn't met Dave. He had been doing a lot of other things, but I became good friends with him there on that trip. And then beyond that, Dave and I had stayed in close contact. In fact, if you donate to the Child Liberation Foundation, part of that goes to other foundations, including stuff like Glen Becks' organization. I've talked about him before. I've had him on this show before. And Dave Lopez, in fact, we're going to have Dave on one of these future ones. He's a highly decorated former Green Beret and a man with a huge, huge heart. In fact, if you watch the documentary that was done on the Haiti rescue mission that I helped to put together the foundation of it, Dave was the one with the long curly hair that looked massive, massive shoulders, and he was the one that started the operation with a prayer. Good man, Messianic Jew, as he calls himself. Anyway, fast forward, Dave, good man, Jawad, amazing man, and Rudy and the rest of the team were there putting their lives in danger and making sure that these families were taken to a place where they weren't going to be raped, where they weren't going to be sold. While we were there in Lebanon, there was a lot of concern for our safety. I mean, I was the donor that started out with some of the money to transfer these guys over to the Yazidis. Plus, we had some other great team members there that didn't want to have to sleep with one eye open all night. And so outside of our room, we had a really nice hotel, but this team had guys that would take turns sitting on a chair out in the hall of the hotel that we were in, with guns, just in case something happened or whatever else. We were so protected inside those rooms while we were sleeping. But that was the first time I've ever, come into a country and somebody says, your tools are on the floor, sir. And I've got a bunch of guns down there and fully armored car. I've been in a number of those in some of these operations, but and then with the cars all changing places and stuff, and then with a guard outside of our room, I thought, wow, this is probably a little bit more dangerous of an area than some of the ones that we did when we were doing undercover work in Latin America. So from Lebanon, since we were already there in the Middle East area, a few of us got on a plane and we flew over to Jordan, Amman, Jordan, which is still, it's another country there in the Middle East by Lebanon and by Syria, by Iraq, etc. And in Jordan, in Amman, Jordan, we met with some other families that had been rescued by our team, some women and children. There were no men in most of these families because unfortunately most of them had been killed. And so we saw some of the conditions that they were living in, which was decent. They were in safe houses, but it wasn't their own houses. It wasn't a place where they could say, okay, I really want to just keep my family here forever. A lot of them were still living in some degree of fear because they were still fairly close to all of the problems that were going on in Syria and Iraq. So we met with some diplomats from Australia. And this was such a beautiful, beautiful meeting because these diplomats from Australia said, listen, we will take care of the relocation. If you guys just rescue these women and children, put them on airplanes, send them to Australia, we have a place just outside of Melbourne that is beautiful, it is safe, and we have allocated this entire area to helping refugees. These women and children absolutely qualify as that. So they agreed to take as many women and children as we could put on airplanes and relocate them and give them a new life there in Australia. So that was super beautiful to visit with them. I got to see all of the things that the team was doing. Fast forward, they had continued working on rescuing these children. They had rescued over 2,000 women and children from Syria, from Iraq, from the surrounding areas and help them relocate, some of them into Lebanon, some of them into Jordan, but many of them, in fact, most of them, from what I understand, were sent to Australia to start a brand new life, to be there in these brand new neighborhoods that were specifically set aside for refugees. And over 2,000 of them was a huge number. Now, one of them that these guys had found was a lady who had been taken about 4 years ago by the ISIS fighters. And her husband was killed, her brothers were killed, her uncles were killed, and her sons were all murdered by these ISIS fighters. And she had been rescued with one of her daughters and were taken to Australia, where she was starting this new life with her daughter. She had 2 more daughters that she thought were both dead. So she was just going to start her life again with this one daughter, with no husband, no sons, no brothers. While she was there in Australia, one of her other 2 daughters that she thought was dead was identified by our team that was in there. Her 2 other daughters, one was 9 years old and one was 13 when they were taken by the ISIS fighters. That 13-year-old was now 17, and our team had found her, got her out, and sent her to Australia to be reunited with her mother. After being there in Australia and recovering from all of this, she said, "I think my little sister is still alive." Her little sister was named Nazarin. She was 9 years old when she was taken. She's now 13. She said, "I think she's still alive, and I think I know where she is." And she gave that information to our team that was there. Sure enough, Naveen was still alive. That's when we got the call. And one of my best friends, undercover operators, Andy, agreed to help fund a mission in which we could film a lot of this stuff together with Glen and the Nazarin Fund. It was almost $250,000, but it was life-changing for not only everybody that was there, but everybody who got to watch the video footage of this reuniting. And it was one of the most beautiful moments of my life. So we got on an airplane. We flew not to Lebanon, not to Jordan. We flew to Baghdad in Iraq. Super dangerous place for, in fact, they said that there was still, this was just a few years ago, they said that there was estimated still 15,000 ISIS fighters that were still in the region, right? So we're like, holy crap, this is not a safe area. But to be there, to see what was going on with the team, to see a bunch of these Yazidi families that were being taken out, and to escort this little girl to go see her mother was going to be life-changing. We get in there to Iraq, and same situation like we had in Lebanon. The guys are picking us up in bulletproof cars. These guys are all fully armed. We have armed security everywhere we go, not just a handful of them. We're talking a massive team of guys, all with guns, all highly trained. And every single time where we went into an orphanage place, we went into these big tent areas that the UN had set up for a lot of these refugees, we were in there visiting with some of them. And our team of security personnel, as soon as they got out of the car, boom, one of them goes up the hill here, one of them goes up the hill here. They're getting into strategic positions where they can see everything that's going on to ensure our safety while we were there. The team took us while we were there in Iraq. They took us to see the destruction that had happened in these neighborhoods. And we drove to this neighborhood, and it was, you can't even call it a neighborhood anymore. It was a war zone like you can't imagine. This was an area that was predominantly Christian, that the ISIS terrorists decided that they were just going to destroy everything that was there. And if any families were still there, they were gone. And they were dropping bombs. There was huge craters everywhere of these missiles and these bombs that had been dropped. And there was not one building still standing. All the roofs were completely destroyed. They were destroyed by fire. They were destroyed, and then there was shells, there was gun shells everywhere, just stringing the ground everywhere from the fighting that had been going on there. And I walked into this house, didn't have a roof, had only 3 walls that were still standing, and it was just rubble everywhere. And I found on the ground this little vase. It had been broken on the side. I kept that vase. And it reminds me that life is fragile. That vase was probably beautifully set upon the fireplace at one point, together with pictures of the families. And because of rigid religious ideologies that were passed down by generations in this region, telling people that somehow other people are evil or that it is okay to kill them because they are not part of your belief system, is flat out evil. I realized many years ago when I was in Turkey. I was touring around with a bunch of my investors in my fund. And at one point, we were just a few hundred miles away from the Syrian border. Our driver had gone to bed, and I was kind of hungry. There was no room service or anything else at this hotel. And I thought, you know what? I remember seeing a couple of convenience stores, some restaurants down the road when we drove in. I'm going to go for a jog. I'm going to go get some food. So I put my running shoes on, and I'm jogging down the street at midnight, 200 miles away from the Syrian border. And cars started to slow down, and everybody was looking at me. And my intuition, my still small voice of truth, my voice from God was screaming at me, saying, turn around now. Turn around now. This is dangerous. And so I'm like, okay. So I turn around, go back to the hotel, and decide to go to bed hungry. And I thought about it for a while. Why was that so strong? Why was the feeling so strong? I've been in really dangerous places before. I mean, I've been this close to guys that were selling 8, 9-year-old children that would kill me in a heartbeat if they knew who I was. And I realized at that point that I don't fear evil people. I've met with the most evil people on the planet that are selling children. What I fear are people who believe that they are good, who would kill me and my family based on that belief, based on a belief that God, their God, would reward them in the afterlife for killing the infidel. I realized that those men that were driving in those cars late at night, that were looking at me as this foreigner that were there, they've been taught since they were little kids that Western civilization was evil. That because of the fact that we allow gay marriage, or we don't have our women cover their faces in public, or maybe we don't kneel on a rug facing the same direction and pray 8 times a day. Right? Because we don't believe in those things, we don't do those things, then we must be evil. And their God will reward them for killing us. Now that's scary, right? That is something we need to be aware of. In fact, if you really consider the biggest dangers in this world, the biggest dangers are those kind of belief systems. When you've got an entire religion or an entire group of people who believe that their God will reward them for killing people who believe differently than them, now we've got a problem. And that's what's created a lot of the contention in the Middle East for thousands of years. Thousands of years, these guys have been taught to believe that anybody who doesn't believe like they believe deserves to die. But I wanted to bring that into perspective when it came to understanding why these ISIS fighters were taking people who believe differently than them and killing them and raping the children because they somehow felt justified. They don't believe they're evil, guys. This is what's sad. This is what's really scary. These guys who are killing these men, who are raping these women, who are abducting these children and raping the children as well, they actually believe that they're justified. They actually believe that their God is okay with their behaviors, that is justified because these people believe differently than them. This is where liberating humanity is going, guys, is we've got to change our perspective, how we see ourselves, how we see other people. Just because somebody was born into a different family and into a different religion, into a different country, doesn't mean they are any less than you. Not only less than you here on earth, but less than you in God's eyes. You know, this whole idea that a certain group of people is favored by a loving, omnipotent God over another group of people. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Because they have a different skin color, because they believe differently. These are things we need to be having conversations about, because this is where most of the contention in this world is coming from. And so we get some opportunities to visit not only with some of these other kids, but we met Nazarin, this little 9-year-old who was now 13, had not seen her family for 4 years and was rescued by the team that we had there. We had the privilege to be there together with Glen Becks and a bunch of his team and be with this little girl as she got reunited with her mom. So we got to see her. We flew on a separate plane so that we could be there beforehand and be with her mom and meet her mom and see all the places, everything else that was there. So we got on a plane from Iraq to Australia. We met with her mother. We met with the sister that was there. And then we took her mom to the airport and we waited for this plane to come in with her daughter. Neither one of them had seen each other for 4 years. Both of them thought each other was dead. This little girl thought that her mom and her sisters must have died because she saw the horrific death of her father and brothers, etc. The mom thought that the daughter was gone as well. And this little girl, she comes off this plane. She's got this backpack on and she's running. She's running to see her mom. And when they hug, they never let go. They just stood there and cried and cried. Things like that make all of the danger, all of the money, everything that we did in these operations worth every second, every penny. To see that reuniting of that little girl with her mom. And then from there, we got to go with them and take them to her new home, to this beautiful place in Australia that they had set apart for the refugees. All of these amazing families that were there, that were rebuilding their life after the tragedy that had occurred in their family there in the Middle East. It was a beautiful, life-changing experience. This was a shorter podcast because I wasn't face-to-face with a bunch of traffickers, but it was one of the most meaningful experiences of my life. Seeing the reuniting of this little girl with her mom. Most of the operations that we've done, because of the fact that me and our team were face-to-face with the traffickers together with the children, they didn't want us to re-traumatize the children by us showing up at the orphanage or the safe house or whatever else. And so most of the kids that were part of these rescue operations, I didn't get a chance to be there when they're reunited with their families or when they're on a healthy home, etc. This was one that I was able to do so because the rest of our team was the ones that were helping to rescue her at the time. And so it was life-changing in seeing that firsthand. It was also life-changing for me to witness the bloodshed that is happening there in the Middle East because of religious differences. These wars have been going on for thousands of years, and it's only getting worse. This is something that we can fix, guys. We can get over this. We can allow other people to believe how they want to believe and not try to force our ideas upon them, which has happened with almost every religion over the last few thousand years. If we can do that, we can come to a place of peace. Most religions believe that there's going to be a time of difficulty, a time of turmoil, and then after that, there's a 1,000 years of peace, and a millennial reign where their Messiah is coming back, all of these different things. A lot of religions believe in that. I think they got that right. However, I don't think God's going to come in and just wave his hand and we're all going to be nice to each other. We've got to figure out together right now, good men and women need to stand up and say, no, this is enough. This is enough fighting. This is enough division. We can figure out how to get along and live in a world of peace. Thank you for joining me today on the Liberating Humanity podcast. I'm Paul Hutchinson. We have a whole bunch more fun things that are coming up in the near future in keeping your family safe, and some joint ones that I'm doing together with my wife and talking about what we can do to make a better world for us, our family, our children, and a better future for future generations. So thank you. Thank you for joining me on the Liberating Humanity podcast. Please like and share this with other people so that we can grow the audience, we can help people become more aware, and we can change the world together. Thank you.